Okay, it's 7 o'clock, so I will go ahead and get started. Hi, everyone. Welcome to tonight's Writers Workshop. My name is Salim, and I will be serving as your host tonight and will help navigate questions. Our topic tonight is solving your story problems with local author and editor Ekta Garg. So if you're stuck on a story and need help, this is your chance to get it. I want to give a reminder that tonight's webinar is being recorded and will be shared to the library's YouTube page. So if you plan on sharing parts of your story, please keep that in mind. Before I introduce Ekta, I do want to share a few updates about the library. We are open to the public and back to our normal hours. If you don't feel comfortable coming into the library just yet, that's okay. We are continuing our curbside delivery service. This is where you can request items at home and pick them up in front of the library. For more information on that, you can visit champaign.org/curbside. If you need help, there are a few ways you can reach out to staff members. You can schedule a consultation at champaign.org/book-a-librarian. You can chat with us anytime the library is open, and you can email us at librarian@champaign.org. I'd also like to share a few instructions for communicating through Zoom tonight. So depending on your device, at the bottom of the screen, you should see the option to chat, which will allow you to type your question in. Next to that is the option to raise your hand, and I will unmute you so you can ask your question. So tonight's all about sharing, so Ekta will be prompting you to share throughout tonight's webinar. Okay, with that said, I'd like to now introduce our instructor. Ekta earned her Master of Science in Journalism in Magazine Publishing from Northwestern University. Her career in publishing started in 2005 when she became the editor for all special projects out of community newspapers, now Pamplin Media Group, in Portland, Oregon. Since then, her diverse career has led to writing and editing just about everything from healthcare to home improvement to Hindi films. In 2010, she added blogging to her resume by starting The Right Edge. The Right Edge and its 3 extension blogs gives her a place to share her short fiction, book reviews, and parenting adventures. It also serves as a communication tool for those interested in hiring her as an editor for their writing projects. She's here tonight to help you with your story. Ekta, thank you so much for being here. I will turn it over to you now.
Well, thank you so much, Salim. I am really excited to do this. I know we have a little bit of a smaller group this evening. I'm hoping we have more people jump in and join us. Typically, when I do these workshops, I will prepare a talk and slides, and it's a little bit more of a formal instruction. The reason why I decided to offer Salim this idea of brainstorming is because all writers need help working on stories. You know, you've got a plot that you're kind of tangling with, you've got characters who are bugging you. You really do want to give them a story worth it, but you're just stuck sometimes. And I got the idea for this when I was working with my daughter on a story idea she had for her English class. She was asking for some help, and I started asking her some questions, and we just started brainstorming. And one of my most favorite things about brainstorming that I was telling Salim before we started is that in the brainstorming phase, there are absolutely no wrong answers. You can come up with as many wild and crazy ideas as your imagination allows, because you never know what one idea will fit what you're trying to pursue, or how it will inspire you to take your story in a brand new direction. So that's why I thought it was really important to do a brainstorming session, to ask people to bring me your story problems and let me try to help you solve them. And the way that we had set it up is that if you can just give me a short description of the story that you're working on, then I can try to help you. A short description of the story plus what problem you're having. I can try to ask you some questions and maybe offer you some suggestions. And this is by no means just me talking to you. Anybody else is more than welcome to jump in with ideas. You know, if you're listening to someone and you say, hey, I have an idea for this. What about, you know, if you do it this way, or if you have a character do this, or if your story goes in this direction? Definitely a place to share, because, you know, as a writer myself, I know what it feels like to get stuck, and I know how much relief I feel once I get unstuck. So absolutely, I'm here to listen to you, to help you, and for all of us to work on this together. So if anybody would like to jump in with their story idea, please, by all means. You'll probably see me jotting down a few notes. That's just to help me remember the key things that you're telling me so that I know how to best offer suggestions in return. So anybody who would like to speak up, you're welcome to raise your hand, to even put it in the chat. That might be a little bit more tricky, but I'm definitely willing to work with you on whatever you need to help your story. So if somebody wants to jump in and get started, please, by all means, I would love to hear from you. Anybody brave? Anybody at all? Solomon, what about you? Do you have a story idea that you'd like some help on?
So, not an idea per se, but I do have a question. So, when looking at the form, one of the areas that you offered help in is setting. And my question with setting is, so if, for example, we're always told kind of write what you know, or, focus on something where, you have experience in. If you choose a setting that you're unfamiliar with, that requires a lot of research, and the more and more you write, you're kind of, so I, chose a setting, and then the more I delve into it, I realized I don't have a lot of knowledge about this setting. Do you have any advice on kind of tackling that? Is there a point when the research becomes too much and I should, rethink my setting, or keep on going?
So yes, there can be a point where the research gets too much, only because, when we're learning about a new place, it can be a lot of fun and really interesting. And, you get to hear about cool festivals that area might have, or the geography or something like that. So it is possible to get, stuck, or not stuck, I should say, lost down a rabbit hole of research. My first question to you would be, how important is the setting to the story that you're writing? I mean, is it going to play a major role? If you have something specific in mind, do you have a specific story in mind, or are you just asking more just in general?
More in general, but in this case, yeah, the setting would have been crucial to the story.
Yeah, if the setting is crucial, then I would say definitely do research. But at the same time, you want to keep in mind what it is you're trying to accomplish with the story in the first place. So, for example, there was a book that I read last year by Chanel Clayton, and the name of it is escaping me right now. But it was set down in the Florida Keys, and it was set during hurricane season. And so, the setting was definitely very important, because some of the events that were taking place were affected by the hurricane that was coming. It was a monstrous hurricane. Chanel Clayton is an amazing writer. And so she was bringing in some real life historical events, as including this hurricane, and she set fictional characters. And so that setting, the Keys, made a difference. If the setting had been, say, Kansas, it really wouldn't have mattered about the hurricane. Does that make sense?
Because it does, yes.
Yeah, so it does depend on what you're trying to accomplish with the story, and what you're trying to accomplish with your characters. What is their character arc? What kind of conflicts are they going through with one another and themselves? And how will the setting affect that? Because we could spend all day and all night learning about a new place. It would be a lot of fun. But if you find that you're spending way more time on just learning about the place, as opposed to how does this tie into my story, I think that would be the key question to keep asking. How does this tie into my story? How does this connect to what I'm trying to do? If you're answering, if your answer is doesn't really tie in, that's probably a good indication that you need to stop.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's very helpful. We did have a question come in. So they are asking, I need a climax for my story about Dutch resistance in World War II. A woman has fallen in love with a man she thinks is collaborating with Nazis, but he's really undercover with Dutch resistance. What climax could reveal his role so that their love story can move forward?
Yeah, hi Louise, by the way. Good to see you here. That's really interesting. And what I would want to know is, what is she doing during all of this? So it's clear that it's World War II. You know, this gentleman is undercover. He's got a specific mission and a specific story goal. So he wants to subvert the Nazis as much as possible. What is she doing? What trajectory is she on? And I think if you haven't decided that yet, once you do decide that, that might actually help answer the question as to how could his real role be revealed and how does their love story move forward. Um, if if you already know the answer to that, let's see, she's helping resistance in her way by bringing food to families hiding Jews. Okay. Um, an easy one to me right off the bat would be that somehow their work intersects. One of the things, I love World War II stories. I've read a lot of them. And one of the things that always stood out to me was the level of danger. There was a constant level of danger of being discovered, of, death, because the Nazis were so brutal and they didn't hesitate to kill, entire families if need be, to punish people. So, if she thinks that he's collaborating with the Nazis, how does that connect to her work in the resistance? And I'm wondering too, if she thinks he's collaborating, what drew them to one another in the first place? Because generally speaking, they would be kind of at odds with one another, right? Like their goals, would not mesh. She is clearly wanting to help people who the Nazis want to kill. And on the surface, he is doing what he can to kill those people. So what is it that drew the two of them together? And if we know what drew them together, if we don't know what drew them together, that's something to answer. If we do know what drew them together, I would say just keep bringing them both into situations where that danger is ever present. And at some point, you're going to reach a breaking point where it's either he tells her who he really is, or maybe she's then in danger. Maybe something bad could be actively happening to her or about to happen to her. Maybe he gets information that she is about to be discovered, and he has to reveal that to her. And in revealing that to her, then he has to reveal to her, well, this is why I'm sharing this with you, because I'm not actually a collaborator. I'm part of the resistance. That's one way to think about it, to look at it. I don't know if that helps. You're welcome to speak up or put it in the chat. But if you want to keep chatting about this, I'm happy to do so. I don't want to bog everybody else down with a lot of details. But just let me know. That's one way that I would think, just keep upping that level of danger, because it was always there. It was constant. It was pervasive. And at some point, their interests are going to have to intersect. And the fact that he's working with the Nazis, if he's like a double agent, so to speak, he's got information that will definitely be at odds with what she's doing and with what he's actually doing. So try to find a way to bring that intersection to the fore. Yeah, good. I'm glad. Good. So yeah, and if you need more help, let me know. I see we do have another question. Let's see. What about names of streets in real cities? My story is set in the northwest side of Chicago during the 1970s. Should I use real street names or make them up, referencing known landmarks, so that no one can protest and say, but that's my house and that never happened? With real places, I would say go ahead and use them. Unless you're setting like a drug raid or something in a very specific house and you're naming a very specific family that lived in that house, I would say don't worry about it. Just go ahead and use real street names if you want to. And then just, make up the people who live on the streets. At some point, we do have to be respectful of people and where they live and how they go about their lives. But if we were always afraid of what other people would think, we wouldn't be writers. We would just be sitting around and having all these big thoughts, go nowhere. So don't worry about it. go ahead and use the real street names. And actually, you would probably be surprised at how many people are even more interested in your story because of the fact that those familiar landmarks are being used. I know I grew up in South Carolina. Anytime I hear about a story in South Carolina, I get excited because I'm like, oh my gosh, this is my home state. Even if they're talking about something that's uncomfortable, I feel an instant affinity for that story. So people will probably feel the same way with your story because it's set in Chicago. So yeah, absolutely. Other questions, thoughts, comments? And again, if anybody else has ideas to share or, that they want to bounce off and share with other writers, and please, by all means, contribute. It's not just about me. This is about all of us working together. Yeah, you're welcome. Absolutely. Other questions, comments? I know the library has their short story contest coming up. So if you guys have, thoughts of what you'd like to work on for that, now's a good time to sort of hash it out and see, if it's actually a really good story idea or maybe if it needs a little bit more work. So by all means, share. And no story is too ridiculous or dumb or anything like that. All of them are good ideas. Sometimes they just need more work. Some need more work than others. Solomon, any other questions that you have?
Not at the moment. I'm trying to think. It's still very early days for me in my writing, so.
Oh. No. I mean, even if it's about characters, sometimes stories, the characters are the ones who sort of help us create the story. When you start asking questions of your characters and start trying to figure out who they are and why they would behave a certain way, sometimes they're the ones who give us the information. And then we put them in a situation. It's like, well, okay, now we've got the situation. Now what do we do next?
One thing I struggle with is for characters is, I'll have the main characters in mind. Of course, I have my protagonist in mind. And then as I'm thinking and fleshing it out, it starts to kind of get confusing of, you have too many cooks in the kitchen or too many characters who are essential to the plot.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a limit, would you say? So for example, if I have, of course, my protagonist and the person who's revealed to be, the villain or, the person causing the problem, is there ever a limit where it gets to be too many? Because I know sometimes you'll reach the end and there's been books where I've gotten so confused that keeping track of all the characters in the book, and by the end, I'm just thoroughly confused. Mm-hmm. Is there like a good number to keep in mind when you're thinking of the number of characters in a story?
Yeah, I think it depends on the length of the story. If you're writing a short story, then definitely I would say no more than one or two.
Okay.
And that's for short stories that are, say, maybe 2,000 or 3,000 words and less. Definitely no more than one or two. When you start writing longer short stories like 5,000, 7,000, 10,000 words, then I think it's okay to start bringing in a few other people. But once we get beyond that, once we get into, say, like novel territory, then it becomes a little bit more interesting because it depends on what genre you're writing in. For instance, fantasy or sci-fi, there are a lot of people usually, especially in fantasy when you have like the hero's journey or whatever it might be. There's all this magic and all this other stuff that might happen. I was a really big fan of the Wheel of Time, and the Wheel of Time could arguably, you could say you had 3 main characters with 2 or 3 very, very strong supporting characters. But then the Wheel of Time is 14 books long, and each book runs on average about 600 pages. So, when you have something that big, I think it's okay to go with more characters. I know what you mean about books having way too many people to keep track of. I would say start with the basics. So you start with your protagonist and your antagonist, or that villain that you mentioned. Mm-hmm. And, building the story from the two of them And, because the main plot conflict is going to be between the two of them. Both of them have goals that they want to accomplish that are complete odds with one another. Now, then, when you think of it as concentric circles. So in the center circle are your protagonists and your antagonists. And when you look at the next circle, who are the people who are immediately around them, who are going to be helping them towards their goals? And their goals, as I said, are going to be in complete contradiction to one another. So it kind of goes along the same lines that the people who are helping them will be in contradiction to the people on the other side, so to speak. And I think at some point, again, you have to ask yourself, what is this character contributing to the overall story?
Right.
If it's a tertiary character, or what we call a walk-on character, like say a waiter in a restaurant, it's okay to let them stay, especially if they don't have a name. But when you start naming people, then you really have to have, even if they're only there for a few scenes, there really has to be a compelling reason for them to be in there. Another way to look at it is, if I took this character and their story arc and their character arc out of the piece, would it change at all? If it doesn't change, then you know that they're not essential. If it does change, if it collapses, then obviously then you know that you have to have them there. So that's one quick way to sort of check and see if that makes sense.
It does, yes. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. Any other story questions? Quiet group tonight. It's a small group. Well, I had a story idea that I was working on earlier today. Maybe you all can sort of give me some ideas. So there's this young woman who is studying to be a surgeon. So she's in residency, and her parents are giving her a really hard time about getting married because they think, that she's too focused on her career and she just doesn't want to do it. And her aunt sort of fixes her up, so to speak, with this young man who's a lawyer. And the young woman's in Chicago, and the lawyer is in Houston. And the lawyer says, well, I really wasn't up for this being fixed up, but all my relatives are after me because last year I was engaged to be married, and my fiance broke our engagement 2 weeks before the wedding. And I'm really upset about it, but not really interested in getting married. However, I want to know if you want to marry me. And she's like, what does that even mean? Why would you ask me? Why would you say you don't want to get married and then you do want to get married? Like, well, my mom is dying of cancer, and I know that she wants me to be happy, and I think this is one way that I can give her happiness. But so that's as far as I've gotten. But I need a really strong conflict for the two of them, because this young woman, this surgeon in training, she's kind of intrigued by the idea. She also thinks that it would be a great way to get her parents off her back, because all of her friends have gotten married and whatnot, and she's just sick and tired of her parents and nagging at her. There's no obvious conflict between the two. I do know that they do end up together eventually, as in like they do get married, and they do end up falling in love. I'm a happily ever after kind of girl in some cases. But I don't have any obvious conflict as to problems that the two of them could run into. So I'm open for suggestions if anybody has one. Some things that they could be arguing about, some things that they could disagree about. What would be some things that would be different with the two of them? Any ideas? And Solemn, you're welcome to jump in too.
just thinking maybe, I like that story idea a lot. And maybe early on, one of the conflicts could be, of course, it seems like more of an agreement between them, for her parents to kind of get off her back. And for him, you said his mother is the one who's sick, or his grandmother?
Yeah, his mother's
His
sick.
mother. Um, as they're going through the motions of pretending to be this couple, it's not really conflict, but maybe one of them starts to develop feelings earlier than the other.
Right, yeah, I could see that. And I know that the fact that they live in two different cities doesn't help, because that could create all sorts of problems too.
Or while they're plotting together, one of them meets someone else that's a potential love interest, and dividing their time between keeping up appearances but also seeing where the other romance takes them.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, I didn't think about that.
Yeah, that's
Louise is making
me and Lou's on the same page.
Yeah, no, but I like that. Yeah, they could be trying to keep up this sort of fake, marriage, as Louise is saying, and then, when people are visiting, it's like, oh my gosh, we got to remember to do whatever to make it look real. But then when they're not around the people, because that could be, I could see how that would get really hard. It would get really complicated after a while, especially if you have relatives who are dropping in unannounced, or um, if you forget to do something that would make it look real. Okay, that's definitely helpful. Anybody else, any story questions? And they could even just be general story questions if you're not, if you don't have a story problem, so to speak, but just general story questions if you have. Like I said, this, brainstorming is all about just talking things out and helping each other. Outline ahead of time or just let the characters direct the story? That's a really good question. I'm somewhere in the middle. So I do some outlining, depending on the size of the story. If it's a short story, I actually do sort of let the characters tell me where they're going. But typically, like for instance, I use writing prompts a lot. So a writing prompt usually gives you something of a situation, right? And so I just start sort of letting my brain kind of stretch my imagination, and usually the character will come to me pretty quickly. And knowing something, even a small piece of a situation or a plot, the character will kind of tell me. So, but I do spend some time thinking about it. So I guess you could say that's like informal outlining, because I don't sit down and like write out either by hand or like, make an outline like, on the computer. But I do spend some time thinking about it. I'm not one of those answers who just sits down, at the computer. It's like, okay, let's write something today. I don't think I could do that. I've heard of people who write whole books that way. Kudos to them, because I don't think I can do that. But yeah, so I guess I do a little bit of both. And once the character has a name, that really makes it easy for me too. I spend some time thinking about their name, and something about just getting that name locked in, even if it's just a first name, and it usually is just a first name for a while. Getting that name locked in helps just make the story just start to percolate a little bit more. So for me, it's kind of like a hand-in-hand process. It's not strictly outlining. It's not strictly. What about you, Louise? What do you do? Do you like to outline ahead of time? And it might be a fun exercise in the meantime. If I pull up some writing prompts and we could just brainstorm some of those. Or just as an exercise, just to get our imagination. I do. Yeah. Somehow that just it's sort of like giving your imagination room to run free, but without being strict about it, but also a little bit of structure. Like I need a little bit of structure.
Well, I think, Ekta, your sound is cutting out a little bit.
Can you hear me better now?
Yes.
Okay. And I was just saying that, I think I'm the type of person who needs a little bit of structure, not too much, but just enough that, I can sort of let my imagination run free after that. Let's see, I'm just going to pull up a writing prompt or two. We can maybe have some fun brainstorming together. A couple of different places I like to go for writing prompts. Ooh, here's one. In a fit of rage, she threatened to divorce him and take their baby. Wow. So my question, if I look at that, my first question would be, why is she threatening to divorce him in the first place? And it says in a fit of rage. That tells me she is really mad. I mean, like, the pot has now boiled over mad. Any ideas as to what would make her so mad in the first place?
Maybe infidelity. That's the first thing that comes to mind.
Yeah, infidelity is usually like the first thing. It's an easy one, I think, to reach for, definitely. Right. Let's see. Maybe he lied to her about something else. Maybe it's not necessarily another partner, but maybe he. I heard something once about a man who had gotten a job, and he had trouble getting a job. And his wife had a very steady position within an organization. So when he got it, he worked at it for a while, and then there were cutbacks and major layoffs, and so he got laid off. But he was so anxious about telling his wife that he actually didn't, and got up every single day, got dressed as if he was going to work, and left the house around the same time she did. And I think went and started looking for a new job. So like, would take his laptop or whatever and was like searching for a new job. And came home every day and made up these stories about what happened at, the office that day. And when I heard about that, I was like, that it's a major breach of trust. I feel like if that were to happen to me, depending on how it all came out, I think I could probably get angry enough to threaten divorce. I don't know if I would actually go through with it, but I could see myself getting angry. You just described the plot of Death of a Salesman. Oh, that's funny. I have never read Death of a Salesman, believe it or not. I know it's a classic. But yeah. And you know what they say, truth is stranger than fiction. And some of the best stories that we have in books and movies are inspired by real life. So yeah, but I know this particular couple, and I know that it actually happened to them. And it was really hard. It was really, really hard. Let's see, substance abuse addiction is another reason for divorce. Yeah, unfortunately. From the books that I've read, the articles that I've read, I know that for people who struggle with that and who let it get, who when it spins out of control for them, that addiction becomes more important than the people around them who love them. So I know that that's a real struggle. And I've heard of people who just feel like they kind of reach the limit and they can't live with it anymore. Let's see. She finds out husband committed a crime. Ooh, I love that one. Yeah, see, now we're starting to get our wheels spinning a little bit more and getting into some really interesting territory. And then, of course, the question would be, what kind of crime? I mean, is it something really big? Is it something kind of small, but, indicative of things that could come, like more crimes that could come? I like that one. She finds out her husband committed a crime. And then to me, because obviously she didn't know about it. So not only is she angry, because this writing prompt is in a fit of rage. So not only is she angry, but she probably is really hurt, probably feels betrayed. She probably feels really foolish. Like, how on earth could he possibly have kept this from me? How could I have fallen for it? So yeah, that's a good one. And see, as you can see, we just spent a few minutes already. We've got the seeds of a story. So that's why I love doing brainstorming. I think it's really, really important. Let's see if I can find another one. I'm going to scroll really quick here. So here's one that's interesting. There was, let's see. Yeah. The last 3 years of my marriage, I was planning for elder care because I thought my husband was in the beginning stages of cognitive decline. After I found him DUI in the driveway, I learned that he had a lifelong substance abuse problem. And yes, I'm writing about it. Yeah, that's really brave of you to write about that. Wow, no dementia, just irreversible brain damage. Yeah, fortunately, abusing substances will do that. And I'm glad that you're able to write about it. And I think writing is a really great exercise in helping us work out the things that are the hardest on us and the things that just can't make sense of in any other way. So I'm glad that you're able to do that. So here's another writing prompt that I found. And it says, there was water, lots of water. That's all I remember from the night she went missing. When I hear lots of water, I think flood. I don't know how big, like whether it would be just in your house or like in the city. Like I know we here in Champaign, we had a whole bunch of rain a couple of weeks ago, Solemn. I don't know if you remember that. But it was raining
Yes.
and raining. Yeah. And, there's always a chance for flash flooding. I lived in Houston for 3 years while my husband was down there for training. And there, I tell people Houston is flatter than paper. And so when it rains heavily, which it does sometimes in the summertime, like the rain that we had here a few weeks ago, there's serious issues with flash flooding. So when I hear lots of water, there was water, lots of water. That's all I remember from the night she went missing. I think flood. I think I grew up, like I said, in South Carolina, right on the coast. So to me, I think storms and hurricanes. Maybe there was a storm, and whoever she went missing, maybe she went missing during a storm. And then I wonder, when she went missing, did she go missing intentionally? Did she go missing on purpose? I remember years ago, I used to watch Unsolved Mysteries. It's one of my guilty pleasures.
The best show.
From when I was like in my 20s. And I remember hearing a story about a woman on September 10th, 2001, who was in New York. And, they have like surveillance footage of her in a store, just shopping, nothing, like nefarious or nothing like suspicious or anything. Next day was the September 11th attacks. The last footage they have of her is shopping in a store on September 10th, and she went missing. She was gone. And I always used to wonder, did she go missing on purpose? There are plenty of stories of people who hit a limit, in their lives. and they can't take it anymore, and they see an opportunity, or sometimes they're planning for an opportunity to come, and they take it and they run. It could be a boating accident. It could. The last line of the prompt says, "That's all I remember from the night she went missing. Lots of water." So I wonder if the person who is remembering, I wonder how they're connected to this person who went missing. Do they feel responsible in some way? Were they, do they feel responsible and they feel guilty, like they should have done more to help her, whoever she is? Were they actively involved in the person going missing, and then maybe so upset by what they participated in that all of their memories kind of got suppressed? That happens, sometimes with trauma. That's where my mind went as well. I wonder, I'm picturing sort of, I don't know if any of you saw the movie Titanic, but like at the end when the boat is sinking and Leo DiCaprio and Kate Winslet are like drenched and everybody around them is all drenched. And I'm sort of envisioning a scene like that where people are like running around crazy, all upset because of all this water, the flooding, whatever might be happening. A lot of chaos. Sort of get the sense of chaos from there. Any other ideas? I can find another one. Let's see. Well, here's another prompt. It's a dialogue prompt. And all it says is, "He was right." Now that can be taken in a whole bunch of different ways, I feel. A menacing sort of way, you can be saying that in a loving sort of way.
Oh, can you repeat what the dialogue was? Ekta, your connection kind of got slow for a second.
Yeah. The dialogue prompt is, "He was right about."
Oh, it looks like your screen froze.
Oh no.
Oh, I think you're back now.
Okay.
It was just 1 second. Okay.
Yeah. No. Did you hear the prompt?
No, we did not.
Oh, sorry about that. I don't know what's going on. So the dialogue prompt is, "He was right about you."
Is it "he was right about you"? Is that?
Yeah, he was right about you.
Okay.
As I was saying, I don't know if you guys got that. That could be something in an affectionate way. It could be something in sort of an evil way. It makes me wonder who he was, how much information he had, and who's doing the talking now. My younger daughter is really into Marvel, and so it also kind of brings up these, she's watching Loki right now on Disney Plus, and how Loki might say something like this, or somebody might say something about Loki. I don't know. See if I can bring up another one. If anybody has any other questions, feel free to bring them up as I'm looking. Here's a really interesting one. It says, "From tonight, the city will sound sirens each night at 10 p.m. to mark the new curfew for residents under the age of 18. From tonight, the city will sound sirens each night at 10 p.m. to mark the new curfew for residents under the age of 18. Solemn, could you hear that?
Yes, yes, I could.
Yeah. Makes me wonder, why is there a curfew for people under the age of 18? Like, what is going on in this city? Is there a lot of crime going on? I mean, that seems like an easy, obvious sort of choice. But, one thing about brainstorming is that you don't want to go with just the easy, obvious choice. Brainstorming is really good for helping us take out those easy choices, those obvious choices, and using some of them. And then some of them, I think we don't use. We kind of put them on the side so that we can get the obvious things out there so that we can get our, exercise our imaginations a little bit more. So yeah, the first thing to me would be crime. There's a lot of crime, and so people have to sort of go back inside, but it's a curfew only for ages 18 and younger. I wonder what's going on in this city. I don't know. Any ideas? Let's see. Danger for kids under 18 after 10 p.m. Yeah, that definitely makes me think of that too. Or if we want to go in a really silly direction, maybe the kids under 18 have to stay home so that the grown-ups can go out and party. And if you know that they're all at home and nobody's going to be out and about, you don't really have to worry about them getting into any sort of trouble. I don't know.
I also thought of, for some reason, my mind went to Peter Pan. And if you're 18 and you're a child, at night, it's a way of keeping track of them at night, so they're not going to other lands.
Yeah, that would be a lot of fun as sort of like a new, I think they call it fractured fairy tales, where you take a fairy tale, a known fairy tale, and just sort of rebuild it, sort of take it apart and redo it. Or that would be a lot of fun, I think. And then what happens, because obviously that there's going to be kids who they don't want to listen to the curfew. They definitely want to be out and about. And then what happens when Peter Pan does come for those kids who are out and about? And then where are Wendy and, her brothers? Yeah. And it's fun, when you look at writing prompts or you do brainstorming like this, as Solemn said, her mind went to Peter Pan. It's always interesting to see where our imaginations jump to. And part of the benefit of brainstorming in a group is that we all have different experiences that we bring to these story ideas. We could each take the same exact story idea and come up with, a whole bunch of different stories. And it's interesting. It's fun to talk them through and see where our experiences, lead us. Here's
I like what you said about not going with the obvious. Try to push things past that. I like that, because our mind tends to just, like you said, crime and then done. But keep on pushing it. Keep on thinking where you can take it next. I like that a lot.
Yeah. And, when I say don't go with the obvious, that doesn't mean that those ideas aren't valid. It's just that, you make a list, right? Literally actually take a notebook and make a list, write down the things that are coming to your mind right away. And as you're doing this, whether you do it in a notebook, whether you do it on your computer, but it's like training for the Olympics, like we've got the Olympics coming up. When you are exercising your brain every single day or every single time you sit down to do this, then that's how much easier it'll be to come up with stories. We read books. My daughter is reading The Night Circus right now, which is one of my most absolute favorite books of all time. And oh my gosh, how on earth did Erin Morgenstern come up with this idea of a circus at night that only comes at night and doesn't come during the day? She's an incredible writer to begin with. But to get to that level of how do we get these really interesting, innovative ideas, you have to get past the regular ideas first. And sometimes those regular ideas they will work. But as you brainstorm, you can come up with a new spin on them. So that's why brainstorming is really valuable. And you don't feel like just because you came up with an obvious idea that it's not valid. It absolutely is. Sometimes you have to keep it simple, and simple is best. But just keep at it and, keep asking questions of the story, of the prompt, of your characters, and you'll be surprised at what you come up with. And as you get into the practice of it, doing it more and more often, your muscles, your imagination muscles, will be that much more fit, and they'll be more ready to jump in, and you'll start doing it almost without even realizing you're doing it. Let's see, here's another one. There was something in the darkness and it was coming straight for me. There was something in the darkness and it was coming straight for me. A lot of times we associate darkness with scary things, with crime, as we've talked about, with danger, things that we don't necessarily want to interact with. Something in the darkness and it was coming straight for me. And I wonder if you're in the darkness and you see something coming for you, there's got to be a little bit of light somewhere, right? I mean, if it's pitch black, you're not going to see anything, obviously. So my first question would be is, how much light is there actually in this situation? And where is that light coming from? I mean, if it's coming from behind you, that's going to cast a shadow, so you won't necessarily be able to see what's coming towards you. I don't know. And why is it coming straight for me? What have I, the protagonist, what have I done? Have I committed a crime? Have I just saved someone who wasn't supposed to be saved? Like, was there some sort of epic journey or quest? I don't know. But as you can see, if we keep asking questions, we start to get some answers and we start to get some ideas that we can play with. See if we can find another one. If anybody has questions in the meantime, don't hesitate to let me. Well, here's one that I think some people might say is, well, I'll read it first. They picked up exactly where they'd left off all those years ago. They picked up exactly where they left off all those years ago. Now me, being a softie and a romantic at heart, I think, to people who may have had a relationship in the past, for whatever reason, they broke up or they were not able to be together, and then now all these years later they come back. My question, well, one of my first questions would be, how long were they apart? And then what was it that made them break up or not be together in the first place? If it's not a romantic situation, if it's two friends, again, the first question would still apply. How long were they out of touch? How long did they not speak? Why did they speak? Was there a fight? Was there just a natural progression of spouses and they couldn't stay in touch? And then another question that would come to me would be, why did they come back together now? What brought them back together now after all this time? And yeah, Louise is saying, obviously be old lovers, but what about old enemies? Oh yeah, I like that. Two old enemies who have stopped fighting for a while, and then they came back to pick up their fight again. So what were they fighting about in the first place? What made them take a hiatus, essentially, from their fight, and what made them pick it up again? Yeah, that's a good one, Louise. That'd be fun to play with a little bit. Maybe one or two more. So here's one for anybody who likes spy stories. The man in the green sweater was the intended target. The man in the green sweater was the intended target. Yeah, to me, this one goes straight to something like James Bond. My sister and I actually, when we used to travel, when we used to be in the airport, we used to pretend like that our watches were like some secret communication device, and we would talk into them and pretend to be like FBI agents. So I kind of, it makes me sort of think of that. But if it says the man in the green sweater was the intended target, I mean, you got to know who this person was in the green sweater, right? But just the fact they picked out somebody in a green sweater, maybe it wasn't that specific man. I don't know. And why is he being targeted in the first place? And who is doing the targeting? What are they targeting him for? Did he commit a crime? Is he carrying some sort of secret information, some money, some, I don't know, a secret vial of something, a vial, V-I-A-L, vial. Like COVID these days. Let's see. Intended target, but is he the one who gets hit? Ooh, that's a good question. That's a really good question, Louise. Yeah, because the writing prompt just says the man in the green sweater was the intended target. So we don't know if he was the, or if anybody got hit. Maybe it's possible that the person who was doing the targeting had this man, in their sights, and for whatever reason they got interrupted. So, you can go a bunch of different ways. You can be the person who was doing the targeting. You can think of that person and their mission, so to speak, getting interrupted for whatever reason. Yeah. I remember I was watching this really silly thing with my kids. This person who was supposed to be a spy and answers the phone, his cell phone, like he's literally in the middle of a fight scene. And his cell phone rings. It might have been a commercial, actually. His cell phone rings, and it's his mother. And he's talking to his mother and then fighting with the other hand. It was ridiculous. But just the thought of that interruption. Let's see. Maybe that's how the neutral observer knows him, as only the man in the green sweater. The assassins know more. That's how the story unfolds. Yeah, that's a really good point. That's a really good point. It's a great way to build conflict and tension especially because we don't know, the reader doesn't know who this person is. Maybe they're supposed to be targeted. Maybe, they deserve what they got, this man. I read this really interesting book a couple of years ago called The Coincidence Makers, and it's really beautifully done about these people who live in the world who are the ones who are responsible for all the little coincidences that happen in our lives. Those stories that we tell about, if it hadn't been raining that day, I wouldn't have met my spouse because I ducked into the cafe to get out of the rain and they were sitting there in the booth. Those sorts of stories. This book was predicated on the idea that there are actually people who are setting up these elaborate situations to make those things happen. And like the suggestion here, we don't really know much about those people, in this case, the man in the green sweater, but the coincidence makers, the people who are doing those things, we get to know them and why they're doing what they're doing. It's really, really interesting. So yeah, that's a really good point. Maybe that's how the reader just knows this person as the man in the green sweater. It's a really good point, yeah. And Solemn, I don't know if we're running low on time, I'm always happy to pull up one or two more.
Yeah, the time, we can go over a little bit. That's okay.
Trying to find prompts that aren't too long to read because I know that it's hard to keep track. Ooh, here's a really interesting one. The last chapter was missing from every book. The last chapter was missing from every book. Now, Solemn, I bet being in the library, you might get some upset patrons if they came in and tried to get a book and the last chapter was missing. Because when I hear every book, that to me immediately brings to mind a place like the library where there are a lot of books. And I, being a bookworm myself, I would probably be very, very upset. I'd probably be really sad and I'd probably be really upset. But obviously, why is the last chapter missing? And for somebody to go in and take out the last chapter, that's dedication to a certain cause or a certain idea. So why is the last chapter? What is the point of taking out? Let's see, makes me think of the Midnight Library. I have not read it yet. It is on my to-read list, but I've heard a lot about it, and I know a lot of people are really excited about it. So I definitely want to read it. But yeah, it's, there have been a lot of books like the Midnight Library and others where there are books, about our love affair with books. I mentioned Erin Morgenstern earlier, who wrote The Night Circus. Her second book was called The Starless Sea. And it was in part sort of like, a love letter to the idea of books and stories and how we interact with them and how we relate to them. And if you're the type of person who likes to reread books, I am for sure. And even if it's something that I'm really familiar with, if the last chapter was missing, I would be very sad. Because it's like, that last little bit of time that you spend with those characters who you've fallen in love with. But it'd be interesting. My question would be, why is it missing? Who is doing this? What is their agenda? What are they hoping to accomplish by making the last chapter go missing? I really enjoy the Midnight Library. Yeah, like I said, it's on my to-read list. I know it's been one of those books this year that everybody's been talking.
It's a really good one.
I know a lot of people have been talking about it. So, but Solemn, does the library have a policy if a book comes back with pages missing? Like, is there something that you do or some way that you go after the last person who had the book?
It really depends. I don't think that scenario has ever come up that I've heard of.
Right.
That, someone took a chunk out. I think it would really depend. Yeah. So.
Right. Yeah, because if I think of, let's say being a librarian, and if I volunteered in a library many years ago when I was living in Oregon, when I was newly married. And so one of my jobs as a volunteer was to process the returns and to process the holds. And so I imagine if I was doing one of those things and I was like taking these books from the bins where they, fall in from the returns and going to physically like check them back in, like go through the computer, whatnot. My first question would be, well, okay, so the book is missing the last chapter. I would probably want to turn around and contact the last person who had it and be like, did you know about this? Did you read it?
Right.
Were you responsible for it? And then that sort of makes my mind spin into a different direction of maybe when they had the book, it actually had all of the chapters. But somehow something about returning it makes that last chapter go missing. Maybe it's a special kind of library where the book finishes out the way that the person needs it to, so in a way that would speak to them personally. Maybe it's a magic library. I don't know. That's sort of where my mind would sort of spin. Yeah.
Or maybe it was up to the reader to finish the story and they forgot to or neglected to. So it goes to the next person, the responsibility of the next person who checks it out. Or
Yeah. And then I would think about that one book that nobody is reading and it essentially never gets finished. So then what happens next?
right.
If we're talking about a story that has magic, now all of a sudden, we can do practically anything. I mean, do the characters come out of that book that's unfinished and somehow demand, maybe they take a librarian hostage and they're like, you have to finish this for us because we have no idea what's going to happen next and we need to find out. I don't know. But yeah, we're brainstorming, right? So any idea is valid. Doesn't mean we're going to use it, but sometimes coming up with ideas helps us sort of land on the one that works the best. How are we on time, Solomon?
Yeah, we're good. We can, if you have another prompt that you'd like to do, we have time.
Just pulling these up as I'm finding them. Okay, here's one. He hit him, cursed at him, and then broke down the door. He hit him, cursed at him, and then broke down the door. Kind of violent. So I would ask, why did he hit him? Why did he curse at him? And broke down the door. To me, I don't know, right off the bat, to me, it would seem like that the actions would be reversed, that you'd break down the door first and then curse at someone and hit them. But the fact that it's set up this way is really interesting. It makes me think of somebody wanting to leave a situation, get out of a situation. So maybe these two men have been fighting for a while, like maybe they've been arguing and the argument has now escalated. And it's escalated, and so the way one of them is going to solve it, he's just going to hit the other one, curse at him, and then broke down the door. But it makes me wonder about the relationship between the two of them.
And I feel like breaking the door would mean that one of them was trapped somehow. That was the only way to get out.
Yeah, that's a possibility. That's a possibility. And I don't know about you guys, but breaking down a door sounds like it takes a lot of effort. So he would have to be really motivated, a lot of adrenaline to be able to, burst through a door like that or break it down. And, Solemn, you say it sounds like that they're trapped. Kind of makes me think of like prisoners, like maybe they're two prisoners stuck in a cell together.
Yes, yeah.
And, they've just had it. They are just done with one another. And they've started arguing. And one of them is just like, nope, not doing this anymore. He hits the other one. But you have to think that, if you're two prisoners in a cell together, you don't have a lot of choices, right? Clearly you don't have any choices about who your cellmate is going to be. So there has to be some sort of understanding, or not even fully in agreement, like not necessarily that you would like this person, but just some sort of, even an unspoken understanding that, you kind of keep to your side and your stuff, and I'll keep to my side and my stuff. So what would it be that would cause the two of them to just kind of like butt heads, maybe literally, in this case? Yeah. I would kind of be thinking about that. That's where my brain would go. Unless it's, maybe these two people are related. Maybe these two men have had a long relationship, and maybe it's been a very troubled relationship. Father, son, two brothers, two people in a romantic relationship. I don't know. And one of them is just, they're like at that, they've had it up to here And they're like, no more. Because if you think, I like to also sort of parse out the technicality of writing in the sense of if you hit someone and you're cursing at them, that stuff takes a little bit of time. That's not going to happen like instantly. It's going to take a couple of minutes, especially like when you're pounding someone, it's not like you're going to do one punch and you're gone. If you're going to take the time to curse at them too, maybe you are, I don't know. Definitely food for thought. Here's a dialogue prompt. Don't tell me what to think. That's an easy one. I'm sure most of us, when we've gotten into an argument, have probably said that or some variation of that, right? So that would make me think of, an argument maybe that I've had with someone and taking that argument and fictionalizing it, making it even bigger, and then using that between two people. So sometimes you can take your own life and give yourself some redemption in the fictional version, or give yourself the satisfaction of winning if you happen to lose that argument that day. But yeah, this one definitely makes me think something like that. And yeah, Louise, you're more than welcome. You're more than welcome. Like I said, brainstorming is definitely, it's a group activity, and it's something that, I love to do. I love to talk about characters and plots all day, all night. And I'm happy to do it anytime. So, welcome. I think that should, give everybody a good start on how brainstorming works. What do you think?
Yeah, yes. Lots of good ideas and good discussion. Thank you, Ekta.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Like I said, I'm, always happy to help. And I know it can be a little bit scary sharing, your own work, but it's really just about trying to push it to make it better. And sometimes coming up with ideas that we didn't even know we would have if we hadn't talked them out with somebody else.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Before we end for tonight, I do want to give one reminder for the next workshop. So on Wednesday, July 21st at 7 p.m., we are going to have Molly Thornton, and she's going to be hosting The Right Moves, which is a workshop that incorporates creative writing and dance. So register for that one if you haven't already. That should be a fun one.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I want to thank everyone for coming, and thank you, Ekta, for sharing some really good ideas and really good prompts, and I took a lot of notes for my own writing, so very helpful.
Good.
Yeah.
Good. I'm glad. I'm always happy to do it.
And it's really nice talking it through with everyone and kind of just brainstorming that way. It really helps. It really does.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm happy to do it anytime. If anybody ever wants to reach out by email or, anything else, I'm always happy to do it.
Thank you so much. All right, everyone, we'll see you at the next workshop. Have a good night.
Have a good night, everybody.